Thank you so much. Uh, it's a big, it's a big challenge to have a session immediately after one of the most popular politicians in Kerala was on stage, and along with him, you had a very popular writer. So it was a packed crowd back then, and I think they are still there. So I understand the challenge of following up after that. But then I would say that we are discussing an even more important issue. To put it in simple words, it's we are going to discuss the end of the world and end of the world order, as we all know. So we have Rohit Prasad here, Professor Rohit Prasad, and this is his book, The Last Dance of Rationality, and he's trying to make sense of the unraveling world order. So a few days ago, we just had a very brief discussion on the book. So for the benefit of your audience, let me put it this way. Rohit is arguing that the world order, which has been in existence for the past 500 years, since the age of enlightenment, that's coming over. That age of enlightenment kind of changed the era of feudalism. Then you had a new world order, which was based on reason and rationality. Now that particular world order is finally coming to an end. Or maybe we are at the finest moment, at the peak of that world order at the moment. And from here, it is likely to go downhill, and then we are probably going to enter into another world order. And he's giving lots of examples. He's giving lots of examples like the unipolar moment, the unipolar hegemonic moment of the United States, the rising economic power of China, which is also offering a kind of a political model as well. So these things are there. Then you have this whole issue of climate change. We all know 2 months ago, Wayanad, and he has been to Wayanad, by the way. So we saw what happened in Wayanad, many people getting killed. Or if you picked up today's newspapers, you must have seen some 160 people getting killed in Spain in flash floods. So this threat of climate change is very real. Then you have the opportunity as well as the threat of AI. So this is what is happening right now. So we are probably at the cusp of an emerging world order. That's what the book is all about. That's what he's arguing in the book. So I would now request Rohit to give a brief overview of what he's been arguing, what he has argued in this book. And I must also commend him for writing this book, because it's for me, it's a very provocative book. It's not every day that, you pick up a topic like that the world is going to an end and making that kind of an argument. So it was a bold move, a brave move, I would say, and I would congratulate him for that. And now I would welcome him to explain to us about the book.
Daiva Saida, Ajish, I'm going to mix some Tamil and Malayalam. Suprabhadam, hello, namaste, salam, Kurikod, Vandadil, Adhyaya Sandosham. Beautiful setting, beautiful Arabian Sea, and lovely audience. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ajish, for the introduction. So the book that I've written is a big canvas book, as Ajish was talking about. And in this book, I make 3 main assertions. The first is that while there are a lot of people who are talking about the crisis of humanity, for example, Noah Yuval Harari talks about it a lot, on account of the threats of AI, climate change, nuclear war. My book argues that the crisis that we are facing is not so much a crisis of humanity as a whole, as it is a crisis of Western civilization. So that's the first assertion that the book makes. The second assertion is that this crisis is happening because the Western civilization has created an extraordinary duality of dazzling light and deep darkness simultaneously. And this contradiction is becoming untenable. And so, in a sense, the downfall of this civilization is on account of its success. It is coming down at the peak of its attainments. And then I further argue that while there are many things that we can associate this civilization with, for example, the model of liberal democracy, or the market-led model of economic growth, or secularism, human rights, etc. Ultimately, what this civilization is based upon is the primacy of reason as the highest human faculty. And therefore, the downfall of this civilization represents, in a sense, a recognition that reason has its limitations. And finally, I argue that it is not all doom and gloom. The downfall of the Western civilization is being accompanied by the rise of new strands of thought, new bodies of material power, new locations of material power, and new faculties like intuition, which are going to join the high table of human faculties along with reason. But unfortunately, as reason cedes a certain amount of space, along with great qualities like intuition, we will also be joined by age-old demons like superstition. And so this age, which I call the age of meta-reason, is going to be one characterized by heightened clarity and heightened confusion in equal measure. Okay? So there is a slide that you can see where I have highlighted some of the confusions that we will face, some of the opportunities and threats that we will simultaneously face in this age. So broadly, what this book is about is the decline not of humanity as a whole, but of Western civilization, representing the undermining of reason as the highest human faculty, and the rise of other human faculties like intuition, but unfortunately also faculties like superstition. So we are in for times of great possibility, but also of grave threats.
Thank you, Rohit. So yesterday, while I was on my way to Kozhikode from Kochi, while I was on train, I was reading the latest issue of Foreign Affairs magazine. So it was largely on the United States, America Adrift. Was the opening essay was by former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. So she also makes largely similar arguments. You know, the thought processes look rather similar. And instead of the unraveling world order, she was saying crumbling world order. I mean, more or less the same. But then she concludes by saying that the world needs America and America needs the world still. So when you speak about this collapse of the Western civilization, so my doubt is, this has been predicted many times in the past also. So, I mean, if we just go back, say to the last century, in the 20th century, that is. So you start with the World War, then you had the Indo-Warriors, you had the Holocaust, people getting killed in millions. You think the world is going to end. Then you had the Second World War. You had a nuclear attack. In fact, 2 nuclear attacks. Then you had this bipolar world. Again, the threat of annihilation was always there. The weapons of mass destruction was much more common back then. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis, people thinking the world is going to come to an end. Then that ends, and then the next century starts. Then what is the first thing you have? You have the 9/11, and you again think the Western world is order is going to crumble down once again. Then you had COVID. Then now you have Ukraine. I mean, initially when Ukraine started, I thought it would end differently, but now it is no longer on the front pages. I mean, it's inside. People, at least in this part of the world, people are hardly bothered. So the point I am trying to make is. And again, this American moment of unipolarity. You previously had you mentioned in your book itself you had the Great Britain as the hegemon. If you go back in history, then you probably had the Romans, one of the biggest land-based hegemons. So Rome evolved, or Rome had to give way. Then Britain had to give way to America. And if America has to give way, I'm not saying that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen overnight, not saying that. But my query is, isn't this somewhat cyclical? And so you get to a point where you'll probably have another hegemon or another major power. So.
Thank you. Those are really great points. So I'd like to make a distinction between the decline of Western civilization and the decline of Western countries. When I say decline of Western civilization, let me quote the playwright Arthur Miller, who said that an age can be said to end when its basic illusions are exhausted. So, when I talk about the decline of Western civilization, I talk about the decline of the basic illusions that powered Western civilization, which is the primacy of reason and rationality. I do not see, and as far as countries are concerned, I do see that the United States has already been joined by other countries at the high table of nations, like China. And that process is going to continue. However, I do see the United States continuing to be very influential for at least another 50 years, mainly on account of the divisions in the global south between India and China. So if I may again repeat, the decline of Western civilization is happening because the fundamental illusions which powered Western civilization have run their course. However, Western countries will continue to be powerful for some time due to divisions, political divisions in the global south.
Then again, I mean, I don't know whether I am repeating the point I made earlier, but then about this unipolarity thing, because I remember reading that you mentioned that this American unipolar moment was the finest achievement of the age of reason, right? But that was not meant to last. That is what I felt, because see, this unipolar moment, if I remember correctly, the first time this unipolar moment concept was used by Charles Krauthammer in his essay in Foreign Affairs back in 1990. So then he very clearly says in that essay that he stresses that this is a moment. This is a moment, this will pass. And then he says, so long as America's economic prowess remains, this unipolar moment will stay. But it is going to be challenged by other countries. And then he specifically names China, Japan, and Germany. Now, I seriously doubt whether Japan, with all its demographic problems, can anyway challenge it. And Germany is also, I don't know whether, it doesn't look like it is capable of, but China, of course. So this was, and Krauthammer predicted that in 1990. And 10 years later, he wrote in a Columbia University journal that, no, it has survived for 10 years. Now I will no longer call it a moment. Now I'll have to call it an era, because it has lasted 10 years. It will last further. That was what he was arguing. But he, I think, very clearly said that this is a passing phase. So if that is a passing phase, then how will we account for?
Thank you. So there is a famous couplet by Mirza Ghalib. Allow me to quote it. He says, हर एक बात पर कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है, हर एक बात पर कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है, तुम ही कहो ये अंदाज़ गुफ्तगू क्या है. Okay, so what this means is at every utterance,
you'll have to
yes,
probably translate
yes,
it for
it
all of
says
us.
that at every utterance you keep questioning my right to exist. You please explain to me first, what is this style of dialogue? Okay, so what I mean is that the method of reason and of rationality creates a separation between the observer and the observed, that which is sought to be known and that which seeks to know. Right? Today, due to the rise of countries like India, that worldview is being challenged. Right? Because today the frontier of science lies at the study of consciousness, which encompasses everything, and therefore cannot be studied using the old paradigms of observer and observed, and need to be studied using a variety of methods, but integrally the method of mysticism, which has been known in the East for centuries, right? And this really is cutting at the foundation of the Western civilization, which is based on the study of an objective reality which exists out there. Okay? Now, so that was a little philosophical, but suppose I was to ask you a question that, let us agree that change is constant, that hegemons will come and go, will be replaced by new hegemons, etc. And therefore, the fact that the unipolar moment is passing is just a part of the natural process of change, the inevitable process of change, and nothing epochal is happening. But then, and perhaps the same civilization could continue to exist provided it mends its ways. For example, if we come up with better methods of regulation of business, etc., right? But then I want to ask you, and I want to ask each one of you the question, would you then argue that feudalism could have been saved if the feudal lords became a little kinder to their serfs? Or was there something more fundamental that was at play there? Let's just think about this question for a moment.
It's unlikely to work. I mean, history has shown that it didn't work that way. Feudalism was completely replaced.
Yes. So, and it was replaced not just because some people were mean-spirited, the elites were mean-spirited or cruel. It was replaced because there was a storm of events happening across different domains which made that system irrelevant. For example, the growth of mercantile trade led to the importance of the cash economy and replaced the feudal economy, which was based on age-old privileges and obligations. Right? The development of new methods of warfare meant that feudal lords supported by the knights could no longer sustain themselves and were no longer needed in the presence of kings who had large armies, which were well supplied with ammunitions and artillery. The plague, the Black Death of the 1300s, meant that peasants could no longer be taken for granted because they were so few in number. Something similar to COVID, right? So I would argue that there are moments in history where fundamental shifts take place. And those fundamental shifts start from a shift of the cognitive foundations of that particular moment in time. And I believe and I assert that that is what is happening right now.
Thank you. I just wanted to then know your view about, see, the Western civilization in that case is not going to, I mean, I believe that not going to go down without a fight. So, as we know that it has based its entire existence on this principle of reason and rationality, which means self-preservation is going to be its ultimate aim. So, in such a scenario, now we see that, especially as you mentioned, the consciousness part. So how is the West, in a philosophical way and also in a more practical way, going to respond to that in your view? Plus, I just want to add another point to this question. That is, it's a huge migration happening also. So the West is not as West as it used to be. As West as it used to be. Like, you have a mix of people coming in, and then the East, in a way, is, especially if you look at it in the United States, in the scientific community, and even in thought leadership, and also you have a large amount of people-to-people contact and people-to-people transfer happening, and Kerala, for that matter, is one of the places which supply a whole lot of manpower to the West, and the district from which I belong to, Kottayam. In many places, many villages are on the verge of shutting down because people are just moving across and then they are not even coming back. So that's just an aside. But the point I'm trying to make is, so you have tools of adaptability and adaptation for the West. So if at a point where it feels that it is going to lose its primacy, what kind of a philosophical as well as a practical response you expect from the West?
So, thank you. It is very interesting that we are having this conversation in Kozhikode. As you mentioned when we were having tea, Ajish, this is the place where Vasco da Gama came in 1498, and that was a significant moment in the history of globalization, and we are discussing the end of a cycle of globalization right here at the shores of the very sea where it started. So that's great. You ask if the West will not go down without a fight. One thing I must remark is that scientists are very dogmatic about the method of science. But science itself is not dogmatic. And the proof of that is that there are many new currents in science, and I dare call it Western science, which are cutting at the roots, chipping away at the foundations of the ideology of rationality, of the separation of the observer and the observed. For example, the whole field of quantum physics and quantum science, which says that the observer changes in the act of observation, right? Itself is a very fundamental development which calls us to question the Newtonian paradigm, right? Or if you think about Gödel's incompleteness theorem in mathematics, which says that it is possible for a mathematical system to throw up statements which are true but which cannot be proved to be true, right? Therefore, the method of mathematical proof no longer remains the only way to arrive at truth, at mathematical truth. And therefore, if it's not the only way to arrive at mathematical truth, then what of all the domains that are much more diffuse and that lie beyond mathematics, right? So the point I'm making is that Western science itself has thrown up a lot of small tensions that question the roots of its own existence, right? And then, so that's one change which is happening. The other thing which I want to state is that there is no contradiction between reason and intuition. They can be complementary to each other, and they should be complementary to each other, right? Unfortunately, what happens is that when you open the door for this thing called intuition, which for most of us is both something which is within our reach because it is part of who we are, and something beyond our reach, because for so many centuries, human beings have been divorced from their own intuition, right? So when you open the door to this new faculty, you also open the door to charlatans and not savants, but quacks, right? And you can see this in the field of medicine, right? So we are in for interesting times. And in that slide, if you would just pay some attention to the slide, I say that when reason cedes its place and is joined on the high table by intuition, you could also have superstition. When we accept that nature is not a handmaiden of human beings meant for our gratification, then you open the door to acknowledging that we are embedded in nature, but then you also open the door to the feeling that technology is something that we should do away with, which is also not right.
We are running short of time. That's what I have been told by the organizers. I had many more questions to ask, but then we have another 5 minutes to go. So very quickly, in this age of meta-reason, what would you foresee the role of India would be, and also the role of democracy would be, if you can quickly answer that.
Right. So, I think if I may go to that slide. Let's go to the slide, Ajish. So, you see, the way I see it is that the role of India in this age of meta-reason will continue to be the role that we had at the time of independence, which is a moral beacon for the world, right? On account of the way in which we acquired our independence. However, in order to acquire that position, and the reason I say that is going to continue to be our best hope for being an influencer in the age of meta-reason, is because in material terms, we are still lagging far behind. We have a lot of catching up to do. But in order for India to play this role, it has to steer the right course in each of these domains. I've already talked about intuition versus superstition, right? When we come to individualism, right? We have to establish the interconnectedness of all human beings. But when individualism gives way to a form of collectivism, we have to avoid the oppression, the age-old oppressions on the basis of caste and gender and religion, right? When we accept that we are embedded in nature, we have to avoid being hard-headed, saying that we have to do away with all technology. If we move away from the Western model of success, which is based on material progress alone, then we have to lead the way in showing that happiness is the goal of life. But happiness doesn't come through hedonism, right? And finally, if we accept that economic growth is not the most important yardstick of success for a society, then we have to move towards an inclusive model of development, but we have to avoid a totalitarian utopia, which is quite possible in an age of AI, where technology will be controlled by a small set of people, even as the vast mass of people think that they have access to the latest goods and services, the latest digital goods and services. So we have to avoid the totalitarian utopia, which is quite possible in the age of meta-reason.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It was a very interesting session. I know it's not an easy topic to discuss. It's not a very easy topic to explain. But thank you all of you for being here and listening to us.
Any questions or comments?
May-
Can we have one question?
Sir, you are explaining all these things with the reason on the behind, right?
Yes.
You are making a big assumption that the human beings are incapacity to reason everything, right?
Yes.
There is a possibility, clear possibility that human beings are not in a position to even explain even the slightest of the things. If you talk to a doctor, doctors will 100% will tell it surety that not even 50% of the reason for any disease they cannot even actually
Yeah.
find out.
Yeah.
So in this kind of condition, assuming at the age of meta reason we can reason everything is a falsifying statement.
Okay. Thank you. What's your name, sir? Huh? Dr. Thomas. Okay. Medical doctor. Okay, Dr. Thomas. Okay. Thank you for that question. See, the Western science has this illusion that if we continue to follow the methods of Western science, we will ultimately learn everything that there is to know. Right? I disagree with this, just like you seem to disagree with it. Right? I believe that there is a higher faculty, which I call intuition, right, which must be wedded to reason in order for us to reach higher levels of consciousness and higher levels of knowledge. Right? However, the problem is that when you open the door to intuition, a lot of superstition also comes in, which is going to be the challenge we will have to navigate. What about?
The reason is always connected to your brain. What about the soul?
The soul. The intuition is connected to the soul. So what do you think is connected to the soul? Yeah, so I call it intuition. Maybe you have a different name for it.
So I think we have to stop right now because the next session will be starting soon. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.